Now, with respect to EEE preparedness, for the past few months, we've obviously been spending a lot of our time on COVID, but EEE remains an enormously important public health issue here in the Commonwealth of Mass. Eastern equine encephalitis is a rare but serious disease that spread to people through bites of an infected mosquito. Most years there are very few cases of EEE in Massachusetts, but every few years there are outbreaks with higher number of cases. We saw one of those just last summer. During the 2019 season, there were 12 human cases of EEE and 6 people died from those infections. And it's important to keep in mind that EEE outbreaks typically last 2 or 3 years. That means that we can expect the 2020 season to feature a high number of cases again. Our administration has been planning for the 2020 season and has taken a number of steps to protect people and communities from EEE. In a minute, Environmental Affairs Secretary Theodoridis will talk about our early spring preparations, including larviciding, spraying, and horse vaccinations. I'm especially looking forward to that part. And DPH Commissioner Monica Burrell will talk about surveillance testing that's currently underway and has already yielded specimens that are positive for EEE in certain parts of Massachusetts. She'll also discuss the DPH Public Awareness Campaign, which is encouraging everybody to take the kinds of steps, once again, that you can take individually to protect yourselves. In addition to these steps, the administration filed legislation earlier this year to enable a more effective statewide approach to combating EEE. Many cities and towns have access to critical surveillance and resources as part of their membership in a mosquito district control program. This is probably one of the reasons why we're here, is because Plymouth County has done such a fine job on that. In a minute, Acting Superintendent Ross Rossetti will talk about the steps that they are taking locally here in Plymouth County, and they're important ones that do make year over year an enormous difference in making the people in this community and this county safer. However, there are many cities and towns in Massachusetts that don't benefit from membership in a mosquito control district, and in these parts of Massachusetts, there is no entity, state, regional, or local, that can engage in what we would call the typical traditional mosquito control activities. And while a town-by-town approach might be okay for an average year of EEE, when you have a 2 or 3 year outbreak like what we're dealing with now, it really does require a different approach. Mosquitoes and viruses obviously don't pay much attention to city or town lines. The public health risks of mosquito-borne viruses such as EEE present and require a coordinated and unified approach on a statewide basis. The legislation that we filed with the legislature, which I do anticipate and hope will find its way through the legislature shortly and get to our desk, will allow the experts at the Department of Public Health and the State Reclamation and Mosquito Board to work together proactively to protect public health across the Commonwealth. When DPH determines that there is an elevated risk, the experts in mosquito control at the State Reclamation and Mosquito Board Control Board may take necessary actions to mitigate that risk. We've had productive conversations, as I said, with our colleagues in the legislature since we filed this bill in April, and we hope that we can work together to get this issue done soon. Passing the bill will be an important addition to existing efforts around spraying, surveillance, testing, and public awareness that are already underway in many parts of Massachusetts. The simplest way I can describe this is to say that most of the places that have mosquito control districts in Massachusetts are the places where historically we've seen EEE outbreaks. One of the reasons why we believe it's important to create a more statewide approach to this is because over the course of the past several years, and last year especially for the first time, we saw outbreaks in parts of Massachusetts we'd never seen before. And that was driven in large part by the changing migratory patterns of many of the birds that infect mosquitoes, who then infect people. And when we talk about a 2 or 3 year outbreak, the likelihood that the second year of the outbreak would take place in many of the places that the first year of the outbreak took place wasn't a sure thing, but it was certainly something that I think many of us expected and anticipated. And not surprisingly, the first case of EEE that was picked up by the DPH surveillance lab was actually in Orange, Massachusetts, which is, again, sort of a new location with respect to where EEE is located, and there is not a mosquito control district there. So part of this is about dealing with the fact that as the virus, not COVID, as the EEE virus migrates a bit, as birds and mosquitoes migrate, it's important that we think a little more about this as a statewide issue and not so much on the particular areas where we've always focused on it, where historically have been the places where we've typically seen the biggest outbreaks associated with EEE.